Hey guys, Seth Fuller, your favorite attorney and your Texas trial champion, here to talk about the Tyre Nichols murder slash beating slash police brutality, whatever you want to call it. If you don't know already, Tyre Nichols is a young black man out of Memphis who was beaten to death by the Memphis Police Department, or allegedly beaten to death. The five black officers, have been charged in his death and have been fired from the Memphis Police Department. Now, they were a member of this elite group called Scorpions, which is like street crimes promoting peace. I don't remember what it stands for, but there's peace in there and street crimes. Definitely a throwback to the crash days of LA, which was like criminal response to street hoodlums. I mean, whatever, they're all nice little anagrams, I guess. Scorpion's pretty cool. Sounds cool. But a lot of you watched the video. If you haven't already, just go watch it. I'll put a video link right now to that video. And it's pretty brutal, so I don't want to have to do any graphic warnings or anything like that. But essentially, the police, Tyre runs off from a traffic stop for maybe reckless driving. Seems to be little evidence of that. This police unit chases him down, catch him on the street corner, and under the watchful eye of their cameras that is supposed to prevent crime, and by the way, is working, proceed to try to, well, ostensibly they're trying to get Tyre, in handcuffs, but basically they just keep beating him. At one point are holding him while one of them's punching him in the face, tasing him several times, pepper sprayed over and over again to the point they're pepper spraying themselves. And the police chief looked at it and said it was like a lack of humanity, which I would agree. It was very reminiscent of the Rodney King beating. And here we are 30, 40 years later, and we are still dealing with the same issues. The main difference, seemingly, is that in this case, all the officers that are charged are black. And so the whole racial thing becomes a whole different topic. But in any event, as a criminal defense lawyer, I wanted to talk quickly about that. And I'm not going to talk long because I'm going to post maybe 2 videos around here where I've previously discussed police brutality, and this didn't change anything. I don't think it's necessarily racial based. For sure, the remnants of slavery and racism and all that stuff come into play with the types of people the police are running into, the attitudes they have towards those people, who is committing crimes, who is in street gangs. But regardless, those factors come into play. But as we can kind of see here, that isn't necessarily the main factor in a lot of these police civilian altercations. Now, the great thing about this is it's opening up this conversation that we really need to have, that we really need to flesh out, which is, what is the line that police are supposed to take? You can look through these police handbooks, and they're almost impossible to figure out exactly, even though they get very detailed, exactly how police are supposed to react in any given circumstance. So a lot of this comes from the criminalization of everything, as I call it, which is like anything can be a felony. So if you make a rule where police aren't supposed to chase you or engage in physical unless you commit a felony, well, then what's a felony? Well, fleeing from police in a vehicle is a felony. So if you refuse to stop for 5 seconds, even if you don't drive fast or anything like that, can they say, oh, he was fleeing in a vehicle? Is that enough to then beat you? So if we base it on how physical the police, the civilian, the person they're arresting, the arrestee, is being, then what's the line? In this case, Tyre seemed to at the very most be just trying to stand up and get away from these officers. Now, that's not okay. It's against the law to flee from officers who are trying to arrest you. Of that, there is no doubt, which is why kind of we get here. But then when someone is just not complying, which is what we're talking about, non-compliance, a huge issue. What's the line? What do we want our police, who we, the taxpayers, pay, to do? And we have to look at this reasonable, and more importantly, we need these guidelines in place so that the police officers can know when they're crossing the line. I know it seems silly. Oh, just be a human. No, that's not how it works. When you have adrenaline involved, when you have ego involved, when you have these people that they've run into before, when they, when all of this gets involved, you can't just say, oh, yeah, use your best judgment. That's not what you can do, and it's not what we do. But we really need to have a conversation before we have this pendulum swing that's going to be happening. Okay? Because in my opinion, this isn't the most egregious video I've seen. There's the shaver video where a guy was shot dead trying to pull his shorts up, crawling and begging for his life in a Las Vegas hallway. There was the shooting of Ryan Whitaker, who was shot trying to put his gun down when he answered the door in his rough neighborhood to police who had been called on a complaint that wasn't valid at all. And the civilian was shot dead in the doorway in front of his girlfriend and then blamed, even though he was clearly putting his gun down. You have Tamir Rice, who was just playing in the park with what could have been seen as a gun, but just playing with a toy gun. And he got shot dead in like 9 seconds or less than a second. I don't know. It was crazy how fast he was shot when police showed up. They just showed up and shot him. These were never okay to me. And I'll say it time and time again. These, among others, are never going to be okay. And you can't explain to me. I've looked at the videos. You can't use bias and confirmation bias to then say, oh, look, Whitaker, they couldn't see the gun, so he could have been doing something. No, he was putting the gun down. He's a civilian who answered his door, is putting the gun down. Shaver was trying to pull his pants up. There's no doubt when you look at these things. But the problem is we've given the police in these incidents that I'm talking about the benefit of the doubt and essentially do nothing, or a jury finds them not guilty. Why? Because we make them, heroes, and we don't give them the correct guidelines to where we can then say, hey, police, here's the line. If you cross this line and somebody dies, you're going to be charged with manslaughter. If you cross this line and somebody dies, you're going to be charged with criminally negligent homicide. If you cross this line and somebody ends up in the hospital or is hurt, you're going to be charged with official oppression, or you're going to charge with assault, or you're going to charge with aggravated assault. Whatever it is, we need to have a line here where we can say, these are the types of things we want you to fight for, and these are not. And where I think the line is being drawn, all the way back to Rodney King, and through every case until then, is there has to be pretty clear evidence. There should be no doubt that the person is being physical towards police officers or towards someone else. The old days where it was definitely okay. Again, that's the thing. The reason we need these guidelines is because at one point it was definitely okay. If you watch the earliest Cops, I think it's the first episode, go back, watch like the first 2 episodes, a detective, because a guy's trying to run, takes out his gun and starts pistol whipping the guy for trying to run. Not trying to fight, but for trying to run. That is in a Cops episode, and nobody was like, whoa, don't do that. In the meantime, I believe in that same episode or a similar one, you have a guy who won't go down, who's just standing there while dogs are attacking him. He's like, he's steroided and cocained out, and he obviously has bad intention for the police officers, and all the police officers want to do is get down and put his hands behind his back. And that one probably still to this day shouldn't be punished. But there is a line, and we need to, as communities, as a people, as an American culture, decide where that line is. And videos are changing. These dash cams, these overhead videos are for sure changing where that line is drawn. But until we make a clear line, we can have this pendulum of back and forth where police are getting off for clearly murdering someone and then being prosecuted for murder for a clear accident. And we're going to have this swing until we can have a line where it says, where we can say, hey, this is not okay. And where good cops can point to that line and have something in their brain where they don't have to worry about being prosecuted for when somebody is just not doing what they ask them to do, is breaking the law clearly in front of them, and all they're trying to do is get handcuffs on that person. That does happen. And a lot of citizens, a lot of people in our culture will say, well, that's okay. If they have to get rough with the person, then that's what happens. But you say, well, we can't murder somebody. Well, for sure. But there was no line. The Tyre Nichols video was brutal, just like the Rodney King was. But Rodney King video, I think a little bit worse. But he lived. Tyre Nichols, I've seen MMA fights where someone takes a way worse beating. There was a female fight where a female took a way worse beating for like 10 minutes and still came out alive. I don't know exactly what was wrong with Tyre Nichols, if he had a predisposition, if he had something going on, or whether they just hit him on the button, or it was just a cumulative effect of all the different stresses that happened to Tyre Nichols. And I'm not, for sure, not excusing the police officers or saying they shouldn't be prosecuted. What I'm saying is we're going to have trouble with these prosecutions. These police officers with, stack bodies written on their AR cover are going to go free because we don't have an idea, and a jury is not going to want to prosecute someone for a serious crime who they're like, you know what? We think maybe this was just a cop who wasn't given clear instructions and was doing his job as entailed to him in the training, in the instruction, and more importantly, the most important part of it is as applied in front of their supervisors and in front of their trainers in the field, and as modeled by the other officers who've been there longer, by the veteran officers and by their trainers. Okay? And so for sure, there's a pendulum swinging where we are giving cops the benefit of the doubt, and we needed video proof of something egregious happening. The first one I remember is I think it was a Philadelphia police officer who shot a guy who was running away from child support payments, and he shot him and then kicked the taser over and made up a story. Now that police officer was successfully prosecuted and spent time in jail. Not enough time in mine, but the cameras are changing things, and we're having this pendulum where some of these juries and police departments and stuff are giving people the benefit of the doubt, and some of them aren't. But now that we have videos that are clear, that are showing this clearly, what it does is it makes us think back to all those ones that weren't on video. To Mike Brown, hands up, don't shoot, where it said that he reached for a gun, but there's no video. And so when we see these that are on video, that we go, whoa, that's happening, and it doesn't match a piece of what the police officer said. Man, when I read these police reports and my criminal clients' cases, oh my goodness, you would not believe how different the police report is from what actually happened. In fact, you wouldn't believe what the main police report on the arrest can be so different from a police report written by the same person later. But it's bananas, and this can result in things like, they were committing robbery when they were committing burglary of a vehicle with no one around. And they're saying, well, they were committing robbery. And then you could use that, as you could see in the Tyre Nichols videos at the second release video where the police are talking, or the third release video, where the police are talking about, he was recklessly, he ran from me, he reached for my gun. You can look in that video. It doesn't seem like they're reaching for the gun, but what that does is put in our minds, how long have they been lying? How many of these cases where we gave the police the benefit of the doubt, was there gross things going on? Was the policeman just lying? We'll never know. We will never know. You and I will never know. But when we look at these videos, we get some clue that is definitely not 0% of the time these cops were lying, or these cops stepped over the line, crossed the line into committing a crime. And again, I think we have to look at very closely at fostering the brotherhood of police work, because we need that in order for these people to protect us well. if you live in downtown Chicago or the south side of Chicago, I think if you live in Chirac, you want the police there doing these things. You want them because you can go look in videos from San Francisco. You can go look in videos from Chicago. You can go look in videos from a lot of these cities, Dallas, where these criminals are doing things very dangerous to the public, whether it's spinning donuts in the middle of a crowded intersection with people just standing around, or shooting off guns, and then as they'll just get away with it because the police are like, we're underfunded, we're undermanned, I don't want to do this chase, and I'm just going to ignore it. But on the flip side, we have this where this crack team of people decide that this guy who is driving a little reckless maybe should be chased down and beaten if he doesn't comply. And so this is the line we need to establish. And I think we can establish that line, but I think it needs to be a conversation in each community and on a national scale. And we can't let the fringes, the people on the edges, the guys who are like, oh, whatever, these who didn't do nothings are just trying to take advantage. Guy gets killed, his grandma saying, he poor guy, he's robbed 3 separate places with a gun. And then the other side who's saying, oh, all cops are bastards and you can't, the police shouldn't be able to arrest it. We can't have those two things. But we can reach it. We can reach in the middle, us in the middle, the citizens who really don't want to see either side happen. Need to find a common middle ground so we can give these police departments a line where if they cross it, they're getting charged. And I think that line can be a reasonable line. And I think the key to this, as I've said in other videos, is that the line has to be at a place where it gives them the benefit of the doubt. But once they cross it, everybody has to know. It has to be probably written into the law, or at least written into the police manual, that if they cross it, they are facing serious consequences. They don't get that benefit of the doubt anymore. The benefit of the doubt is written into, until this point, we won't charge you, but if you cross this line and disobey this is when you will have charges, and the jury is going to be told you were given a clear line. And that way the jury is more likely not to give you the benefit of the doubt. And that's the best way to have these trials be fair, where we don't have a Rodney King outcome, where we don't have a Shaver outcome, where we have, I would say, an Amber Geiger outcome, where the jury can be fair because this is the line that you crossed. And that line was different than what a citizen's line would be. But because you were a police officer, but once you cross it, all bets are off and you're treated like someone who broke the law, like a regular citizen, like the guy you beat to death. And by doing that, I really do think we can change these police departments, and we can have a new environment where the police can do their work and feel confident doing their work, but also not cross the line and violates people's constitutional rights and not hurt people. In any event, that's my whole breakdown of the Tyre Nichols. Well, I guess I better say whether I think they'll be successfully prosecuted. Yeah, I think these cops will probably end up being prosecuted for something akin to criminally negligent homicide. That's my guess. And that maybe a couple of them are going to get off who didn't really hit them or anything. So I think maybe you'll have maybe at least 2 to 3 convictions and then 2 non-convictions. I wouldn't be completely surprised if they got no convictions, and then I guess people are going to riot. But now I hope we don't call them race riots, because everyone involved is African American. In any event, that's my prediction. That's my breakdown. Go watch my other videos if you want a more clear, concise view of how I feel about police officers. If you're like, oh, he's a bootlicker, or oh, he's these liberals who think police should be disbanded. No, I'm very reasonable. I love police. I think they are necessary, but I also am friends with a lot of really good police officers, so I'm probably a little harder on the crappy police officers, because as a criminal defense attorney, I see the terrible things that happen when they are allowed to run free and and violate the constitutional rights of others. If you are arrested or come across this, you can contact me. I'm your Texas trial champion, Seth Fuller. Better call Seth. And please subscribe, like, whatever you want. I appreciate y'all, and I hope you like what I have to say because it comes from the heart. Have a good one.